I won't live until I die.
Today we are talking about the history of Parkdale.
Everything old is new again. I'm here with Morgan Cameron Ross. He's the guy behind the Old Toronto series, also Old Canada series, also Old Ontario series. These are popular social media accounts. If you haven't been to any of them, check them out. They post old photos from Toronto and show us what our city was like 10 years, 15, 20, 100 years ago. So Morgan, who's the true Toronto ambassador? Is it Drake? Is Drake the reason that we got on the map in the first place?
Well, that's an interesting question. Like, Drake is a big fan of the Old Toronto series, and he's always following the Instagram and stuff like that. And as silly as it sounds to some people, my parents included, that Drake would be the main ambassador for Toronto, in many ways it's actually true. So in terms of talking to a different generation of people outside of Canada, he really did kind of put it on the map in terms of people of a certain generation learning about Toronto and being told by a pop star that they respect that Toronto is a cool place to go. So as funny as it sounds to my parents that Drake is one of the main ambassadors of Toronto, I have to agree with it. And I also like that he follows Old Toronto series. It's true.
First of all, Mr. Ross, tell us, what was the impetus behind creating Old Toronto in the first place?
Well, I was a musician for years and years, and I wrote a couple songs that did what I considered quite well. So I took some time off music, and what I did was I started a little Instagram, which I called Old Toronto series, and that kind of spiraled into like a full-time job for me right now, which is Old Toronto series and Old Canada series. I went back to school. I went back to grad school to study history, Canadian history, and now I'm on Zoom with you right now.
So how did the site get so popular? Why do you think people gravitated as they have to Old Toronto?
It's short, consumable content, and in such an odd time in history right now, people want to learn something in a very short amount of time, and that's kind of what Old Toronto series and Old Canada series provide.
William Lyon Mackenzie King, the longest-serving prime minister in Canadian history, was savvy. He was smart, but he also is remembered as being one of the most eccentric and odd people in Canadian political history. He's remembered often as the bachelor who slept with a photo of his deceased mother above his bed, as the man often having seances with past kings, painters, presidents, and of course, his dear mother.
Short vignettes and short mini docs about what's going on in a manner that people can learn something in 2 or 3 or 4 minutes.
Is there one building or one structure or something that really sort of set the spark for you?
Yeah, we have Trinity Bellwoods Park here in Toronto, and I live near there, and I go there with my dog all the time. And the gates there, for whatever reason, the gates there that enter the park, it's one of my favorite things. They've been there since the very beginning of the 20th century. Just these beautiful gates. And I always thought to myself, like, why are these very fancy gates here just for a park? So I looked into it. I learned this a decade ago, but there was Trinity College. So there used to be a university in the park. But just the sheer fact that there were these beautiful gates leading to what appeared to be just an empty space kind of led me to look into it. And then, because I walk there every day with my dog, I just ended up looking around so much that I kept learning more about it. And I'm working, my master's thesis has to do with the history of that park and that area. So for me, that park specifically is close to my heart.
Morgan, how do you choose what gets posted on there? The other day you put on the Mr. Green Jeans menu. That threw me way back to my childhood. But there's the photo from CSNY playing Varsity Stadium, which is wild and which I didn't even know happened. And then you had the three men and a little lady cast at the Leafs game in Maple Leaf Gardens more recently as well. So how do you choose?
Well, it depends on if it's for Old Toronto series or Old Canada series. When I post things for Old Canada series, I have obviously a lot broader scope. So, I'm from the West Coast. My family originally is from the prairies, so I have an affinity for. Well, I've traveled all across Canada, north and east and west and south. So I love the country. So I kind of, well, long story short, I post what I want to post. And if I find it interesting, either for historical purposes or just simply for nostalgia purposes, Mr. Green Jeans, as you mentioned, was a restaurant in Toronto. And it precedes me because I wasn't living here at the time. But I found out that people just lose their mind when I post things about Mr. Green Jeans, simply for nostalgia reasons. So every once in a while, I'll just post something about Mr. Green Jeans, and it's almost as though I can hear people screaming from the other side of their telephones because they lose their mind. I post, as you said, CSNY, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young playing at Varsity Stadium. There used to be so many giant concerts at that stadium, and it predates me by a long time. But every time I see all these giant, whether it's Hendrix or Lennon, unfortunately Lennon and Yoko Ono, but some of these epic, iconic concerts there that I sadly missed. But Canada is just full of cool, interesting historical photos, and so is Toronto.
Give us some of your hidden gems. People are always looking for hidden gems in their own city, and there's so many here.
Well, in Toronto, there's tons of hidden gems. One of my favorite, or one of the most interesting, let me say it that way, things that I know about Toronto is James Earl Ray, who assassinated Martin Luther King Jr., went up to Toronto immediately after, and this is where he hid out. So Ossington Avenue in Toronto is where he spent the next few weeks hiding from the FBI and hiding from the world. So the house that he stayed in is right on Ossington, and I always find that a bit mind-blowing because I'm going out to a restaurant or a bar or whatever. There's this like important, sad, interesting part of history right in front of me.
I think one of the cool things I did not know, I'm a huge baseball fan, first of all. I did not know that Babe Ruth, his home run ball is still maybe in Harborfront somewhere. If you can get some scuba gear and go find it.
So part of that is reality and part of that is mythology. But what is reality is Babe Ruth's first professional home run ever was in Toronto when he was playing what we would call like AAA ball now. So it was the minor leagues at the time. And he was playing, and he hit his first home run on Hanlan's Point Stadium on the Toronto Islands. This big stadium that was there for decades. So he hit it over the right field fence, which is true. But as Toronto mythology goes, no one found the ball, which is also true. Therefore, meaning that ball is still in the water right there, which very well could be the case. Although 107 or whatever years later, I'm not convinced that this little leather ball is just, bobbing around.
Morgan, what's your favorite, architectural building in the city?
That is a stumper. I mean, I can tell you the ones that I miss. The old Toronto Star building on King Street. It was this Art Deco, beautiful building. And that was the inspiration for the Daily Planet in the Superman series, because Joe Shuster, the man who co-designed and co-created Superman, used to work at the Toronto Star in that building in the 1930s. So when he was illustrating Superman comics, he drew the daily, well, it was called the Daily, we know it as the Daily Planet through Superman, but the original Superman comics referred to it as the Daily Star. So not only did he sketch more or less that building, he called it the Daily Star. So, you know, I'm a sucker for Art Deco design. So there's in downtown Toronto, there's quite a few old buildings, some of them still there, that I love.
Maureen, what posts generate the most likes, the most feedback from your followers? I'm curious about that.
That one's an interesting one because what excites me and what I find really interesting isn't always what other people find interesting. There's sometimes I'll find something that I'm so proud to find and that's so historically interesting and unique, and I'll post it and no one cares. And then sometimes I'll, you know, these nostalgia things where it's, you know, the Hokey Pokey bear, and people are like, ah, Hokey Pokey bear. Not that there's a Hokey Pokey bear, but it's like what people get excited about and what I find interesting don't always overlap. So, you know, what I find interesting is more, you know, more geeky than what Joe Average finds interesting.
You also got
Yeah.
Old Canada. You just mentioned earlier, Old Canada. What have you learned from launching that? I mean, that's stuff from all over the country.
Yeah, so we've more or less started Old Canada. We filmed something like 7 of the episodes. We've only released maybe 2 or 3. So over the next little while, we're going to be releasing more. I filmed them in Vancouver, Calgary, Banff, Nova Scotia, Manitoba. We filmed it all over the country. So I'll be releasing more of those, and I try to make it kind of non-conventional stories because we all know the big stories, and why not tell the smaller stories? I just released a little video for Old Canada series about the Banff, being in Banff, and how William Lyon Mackenzie King was there with the King and Queen in 1939. And there's this really interesting photo that's this very historically important photo of the King and Queen and William Lyon Mackenzie King at the hotel. But the interesting thing is, for King's promo material for his election campaign to become the Prime Minister of Canada, he had it, what we would call photoshopped. He had it edited, the King had the King edited out of the photo for the promo for his election campaign. It was a difficult process to have someone taken out of a photo at the time. It was more or less being painted, although it looks perfect. But also the King was still reigning. So you had the Prime Minister of Canada editing out the actual King from a photo. So it just looked like it was him and the Queen. So it was just, for me, it was just, what a wild thing to do. So we just did a video about that. I named it "When the King Erased the King." Yeah.
That's wild.
Funny little title.
And you also fundraised for the Daily Food Bank. So it's not just, you know, fun and games. What was the decision behind that to give back in that way?
Well, the real thing is, we have across Old Canada and Old Toronto, Old Ontario, we've got 750,000 followers on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. And so when you have hundreds of thousands of followers, you can kind of ask them to do certain things. So for Old Toronto series last year and this year, we did a fundraiser for the Daily Bread Food Bank. So, you know, in the last 14 months, we fundraised over $29,000 for the food bank, which is 29,000 meals for people that are needing meals. So the way I looked at it is if you have the following, if you have the ability to fundraise, why not point them in a certain direction? And the real thing is, if you're asking for something that people care about, it's not a burden. If someone says, Morgan, the Humane Society is looking for some help, I think, well, of course I'll give help. Wherein if they didn't ask me, it may not have come to my mind. So I feel like there's an obligation morally, kind of, why not ask people to help out? I think that's what it boils down to.
Morgan, is there, I mean, I saw the old exhibition stadium stuff on Old Toronto. I was lucky enough to go there a couple times before they tore it all down, but I want to know from you, is there a place that you kind of wish, building that you've seen, that you wish you had been able to see in real life?
Oh, wow. Maple Leaf Stadium. So the old baseball stadium in Toronto, I wish I saw that. They tore it down in the 1960s. It was this beautiful old concrete, I guess it was, stadium. And that's where the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball team played for 50 some odd years or whatever it was. So I wish I had seen Maple Leaf Baseball Stadium. I'm a huge baseball stadium fan. I've been to, I think, around 30 Major League Baseball stadiums throughout the US and Canada. And
no way.
Yeah,
That's
no,
awesome.
if not a little bit more. I tried in non-pandemic times. I try to go to 2 or 3 Major League stadiums that I've never been to every summer. And so for me, Maple Leaf Stadium would have been cool. I never saw Exhibition Stadium because it was already torn down when I moved to Toronto. But that said, it looked like such a ridiculous stadium that I obviously would have wanted to visit, because it's easily the most nonsensical stadium I've ever seen. Where the first time I saw the aerial photos, I was like, there's no way. There is no way that stadium passed the test for the major leagues, but it did. And that right field fence is ridiculous because as you remember, there's just no stands there. It's just the football field for an extra 70 yards or whatever it is. And I can't believe they allowed people to sit in the stands in center field, because, they literally couldn't see the stadium or the field. So I would have gone there if I could go back in time. I would have seen some driving 85 Blue Jays and been frozen with all the seagulls and stuff like that. But there's so many across Canada. There's so many places that I wish I had seen, and that's why I travel so much now. So I get to them before some evil Grinch tears them down, or developer, probably.
Morgan, those seats were $4. You could get them, I think, at the AMP or at Dominions, which is now Metro.
Hey, I would have gone
there.
And I would have gone with my flask, and I would have had actually I would have been too young at the time, so gone with my my milk or whatever I had. I respect cheap, crappy nosebleed seats a lot, and I've had hundreds of them, so I'm sure I would have had a great time.
Okay, before I let you go, Morgan, I also read that you've got a book about haunted houses in Toronto in the works.
Yeah, I'm working on a couple books right now. So one is about the history of hauntings in Toronto. We're working on another one which is more of a coffee table book about maps. I love maps. I'm absolutely obsessed with maps, cool old history maps. We actually sell them in our store at oldtorontoseries.com. We sell a selection of old historical maps of Toronto and of Canada. Just maps, maps are so cool, because if you put them on your wall, you'll end up, if someone visits your house in non-pandemic times, they'll end up looking at it and they'll be staring at it for 3 or 4 minutes trying to figure out all the things. which is different than any other piece of art, because you're just like, oh, I like that art, or I don't like that art. But with a map, all of a sudden you're engaging with it for a few minutes. So we're working on a book about maps as well, and we're attempting to develop a TV show of some sort, which is a whole can of worms there. I really like telling historical stories. I like talking to people about events that they don't know about. So I'm going to keep doing it.
All right, awesome. Be sure to check out more of Old Toronto on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Are you on YouTube too?
Oh yeah, YouTube.
YouTube as well.
Go to YouTube. Go to YouTube, Old Toronto series or Old Canada series, and you will find a whole bunch of our mini documentaries.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Morgan. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel down below and let us know what you think.
Thanks for having me.